Hello, this is Michael Hexter. Welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. This episode I'm calling If Trump is Indicted as a Spy, the Whole GOP Will Teeter on the Brink of Collapse. So I'm working out here some of the possible ramifications of what happened this week and with regard to Trump's apparent apparently absconding with top secret documents, including nuclear secrets, and also some other sensitive national security documents to Mar-a-Lago after the end of his presidency or at the end of his presidency. And his home is Mar-a-Lago. And so this changes the now there's a lot of focus on how the current GOP and its wind machine, its propaganda apparatus around it, is trying to turn this to a trivial matter, something that can simply be made into political fodder that will support the GOP's claims that Trump is being falsely accused, that he's the target of a witch hunt, that all this is very normal, what he did, and so forth and so on. But I think it's going to start to ring more and more hollow to many in the GOP base, because of the nature of what he's being accused of, and also if there really is credible evidence enough that the very, very slow and one hopes methodical and one hopes even brave Department of Justice apparatus, including the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, if they actually pursue what should be criminal charges against Trump, including what appears to be likely espionage. So under the Espionage Act, and there are many, many ways in which that is being spun, including the misuse of the Espionage Act in the past against people, for instance, closer to my political ideas and political direction, more on the left. But in this case, and those were, sorry for the double entendre, trumped up accusations, often using the Espionage Act against various whistleblowers and people who were really, in essence, in their depth of their convictions, were trying to help either people in general in the United States, help the United States realize its ideals, were exposing crimes that the United States did in the past, so forth and so on. In this case, Donald Trump does none of these things and is not interested in any of that high-minded thinking and high-minded goals that some of the people who previously were mischarged under the Espionage Act. But it seems as though he, as a venal, self-centered man who appears to have some very shady ties with a bunch of different foreign countries and so forth and so on. And at some point, I really don't care. The previous accusations against Trump were mainly focused on Russia, and it could be Russia that he's doing these favors for. It could be Saudi Arabia. I don't know. It could be even Israel. It doesn't matter in this context, because it's simply the act of stealing documents to try to give them to foreign powers, which is anathema both to the duties of a president. I mean, it totally negates any assumptions that one might have that Trump was simply a naive bumbler or whatever, or he is again, not thoughts that I have ever held for very long. But there are bands of protectors of Trump and of the and attackers of the people who were accusing him from very early on of being essentially like a traitor or like a spy in this case, for another country, and um, and they were attaching attaching to the particular boogie people, including Putin and so forth and so on. And I think what matters is that we have a person who simply is either self-interested and also so arrogant to think that he can just take these things and make money off them, and the people who would be paying him would be foreign governments and so forth and so on, or simply would take them for his own self-interest and just sort of thinking they're mine because I was president, and so extreme narcissism, extreme beyond what can usually finds in the narcissistic spectrum in everyday life or even in most clinical settings. So anyway, so in this case, he so he is now, or this discovery or this potential for him to be seriously indicted as a spy undermines directly the whole apparatus, the ideological apparatus of the Republican Party, and it pushes it in, or stoves it in my opinion, in a way, at least pushes it to the point where a slight push by Democrats or by journalists, even who are not necessarily Democrats, or members of the Department of Justice who should be nonpartisan, but obviously are led by a politically appointed attorney general. But anyway, a fact-based push on these findings, and I don't know all the details. I don't know all, should really just entirely, almost entirely obliterate the false, often assumption that the Republicans care about national security, that they are staunch defenders of the national security state in certain contexts. But here is their leader who has directly undermined the national security state. And I'm no big fan of the U.S. national security state because it's been the instrument of imperialism. It's been suppressed political movements around the world, and movements toward independence for many countries, and in the name of U.S. national security. Ludicrously expanded notion of national security that it prevents other people in other countries from determining their own political and economic fates. So anyway, this national security state was supposedly the Republicans, they were staunch defenders of this. Now also they're Democrats who have been staunch defenders of the national security state, and so it's been a bipartisan affair to some degree, but the Republicans were thought to be more so. They were thought to be more patriotic. They wave the flag more. They wrap themselves in the flag more. And Donald Trump wrapped himself in many situations, not all, many situations in that flag. And he did this, what seemed very obviously a pretend form of piety toward the national security state and the military industrial complex. And so, but anyway, this finding really, even if you were a critic of the Republicans, if you hate them, so forth and so on, or if you're a critic of the national security state, the concept of a Republican president, the leader of his party for 5 years now, almost 6 years, that he acted as a spy, or or at least as a amoral vendor of national state secrets to, or potential vendor to, anyone who would buy them from him, and he saw them as his personal property, or to do something with them, these national secrets, so forth and so on. That that even if you're not a great defender of either of those two institutions, you see the contradiction there. You see the that the sham, that the enactment of this sort of patriotism and either America first or America over everybody, that all of that falls away, and what you have is simply self-interested actors trying to get advantage for themselves in alliance with, often with powerful people in other countries, or with them as business partners or as handlers or whatever it is. So it immediately explodes a lot of the American mythos in this area, and particularly as associated with the Republican Party. Now, the Democratic Party has attempted to position itself as one of the staunch defenders of this national security state and the worshipers on this sort of altar of piety toward American, both military security and also the military apparatus overall. The Democrats have tried to position themselves, especially more recently, as stauncher defender of that state. But they often, those Democrats, often see themselves as bipartisan defenders. In other words, they see themselves as emulating the Republicans, or being more like the Republicans, who are supposedly the truer guardians of this Americanness and of this American military power and the security apparatus that supposedly undergirds that. So, and this sort of throws up many people who are of a sort of paranoid bent are attracted to either the far right of the Democratic Party and the military fans in that group, or more likely the Republican Party, and are more caught up in that, let's say, kabuki theater around American might, American military prowess, American that supposedly we're defending ourselves by accumulating weapons and by making war on other people, so forth and so on. And you have, anyway, the leader of this party, who has also reshaped the party to be his cult, 98% of it, or 97% of the party, that if he is exposed to be in credible form to be a spy and a traitor to the United States, that immediately exposes all the people who, the 97% of that party who has lined up behind him, to ridicule, to exposure, to, and of course they'll have many reactions to it. And the people who are opposed to that party and opposed to its operations aren't necessarily going to give the extra push to collapse that party, to say, look, you are the ultimate hypocrites, you're the ultimate empty people, because you've enabled a spy to steal state secrets, among other things, and you've protected him, and you've been right, driving the getaway car for him, and politically, and so that exposes it. Now, I'm not saying they're going to have this moment of aha, I've done wrong. I'm going to either scurry under the table, or I'm going to confess my sins, or there'll be a whole series of people who do as the GOP is doing now, to quote unquote spin this, to make this seem like it's nothing, to make it seem normal, so forth and so on. But ultimately, I think, not because people are good or anything, or that propaganda doesn't work, which it does, but that people will realize just how fundamentally low and fundamentally, even in the using their own values. In other words, if you strictly use their own values, if you don't use my values or the values of the Democratic Party, which are slightly different, but I have sort of a version of those values, but it's more to the left. But that even if you use the values of the Republican Party and its ethical foundations, even though we're talking about people who care very little about ethics, but they simply will not be able to, if people push a little bit, be able to make any coherent case that they are protectors of the United States, are strong people, so forth and so on, are for the military, and any of the things that they talk about, that they think they are. And I don't think the response of the Democrats should be, we're more for the military, we're more the worshipers in this temple of national security and essentially imperialism, but that we need to create security for everybody, including the United States, and we don't do that by stealing secrets and giving them away. Certainly, we also don't do that by increasing the military budget, every year. So it's now, 7 or 8 times the size, or 6 or 7 times the size of the next country, I think China. So anyway, so we don't accept the fundamental grounds or terms of what is the good that the Republicans have established, but we simply say, look, you're totally confused about what is the good and what isn't. You've been misled by this guy who, or you've misled yourselves to worship this guy who is a spy and a traitor to you and to the country. And so, you have a lot of deep thinking to do. Maybe you should step away from the politics. And so I don't think the Democrats have a taste for this kind of super majoritarian power that they could accumulate if they did a kind of social welfare plus recapturing patriotism for the 21st century, not as the flag waving BS, but as being loyal to each other and loyal to the ideal, at least, of national security, not necessarily as it's been pursued in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, 70, 80 years, but that we rethink that, but still we have this party across the way who's entirely lost the plot, okay, and have been supporting a criminal and a traitor out of a delusional set of thoughts about who he is and who they are and so forth and so on. So anyway, so if you think of this another way, I'm thinking, I like to think in terms often of the way the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci thought about, and he's used by also people not on the left. Okay, I think some of the American right wing has used his ideas better than practical people on the left. But anyway, but if you imagine that there's something called hegemony, where you have the sort of the ideals and the sort of high altar or whatever of national identity, so forth and so on, in which has certain principles, and that's being fought over all the time politically. Who is more representative of that? Who is the better, not necessarily only national identity, but of human identity, but nevertheless attached to this particular national state. That those pillars or that altar or whatever, the things that support that altar of national ideals and of what's considered to be the most powerful position ideologically to be sitting in, and in other words, to be in the powerful position and to be speaking as if from right, as if being the right person, being the right kind of people. Anyway, in that architecture, in the United States, being a national security hawk, so forth and so on, being part of the military, have been components of that hegemony, that hegemonic structure, and the Republicans have been better at claiming that they represent that. And if they are exposed, a large portion of their justification goes away. And anyway, the Democrats could enjoy supermajorities if they function well as a power-wielding party that wields power for the good of people, enacts good public policy, and also pushes on the Republican weak points, and also, creates a reasonable national security policy that is plausibly will create more security, or similar or more security for people in the United States and also in countries around the world. So anyway, at least those that we have are allied with, and so forth and so on, who and we can create collaborations with them, so forth and so on, to help them achieve security, which is still unfortunately the role because of our imperial position, and how to overcome that requires more thought and more than I want to discuss here, and so forth and so on. But anyway, what's opened up is a collapse of this key part of this ideals, in which of the supposedly what are American ideals that the Republicans supposedly are representing, that this episode with Trump and their embrace of Trump collapses their case that they are good at that. And if the Democrats are willing to push it hard enough so that they fall apart. So there are a few ifs in there. There are a few in that causal chain, but I wanted to think about that. So we can have more interesting discussions in the future. In any case, if you like this video, please like it. And also, if you're enjoying, by the way, also share your comments in the comments below. And also, if you're enjoying Politics 2100, please subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.